The gunshot wound in Lucas Morgan's side had festered 3 days before the fever took hold, and by the time he realized he was in real trouble, he was already 30 miles from the nearest settlement with nothing but open grassland stretching in every direction under the merciless August sun of 1873. He had been riding fence lines for the massive cattle operation that sprawled across western Iowa, checking for breaks and strays, when a dispute with cattle rustlers had left him bleeding and alone. Lucas had managed to cauterize the wound with his knife heated over a small fire, but infection had set in anyway, and now he lay shivering despite the oppressive heat, his horse grazing nearby, the sky wheeling overhead in dizzying circles. Brianna Fletcher had been tracking the lone rider for 2 days, not out of any malicious intent, but because her father's ranch bordered the open range where the big outfits grazed their herds, and she had seen the buzzards circling in the distance. At 22 years old, Brianna had grown up learning every skill necessary to survive on the frontier. Her father had raised her and her two brothers after their mother died of cholera when Brianna was just 8, and he had never treated her differently because she was a girl. She could shoot, ride, rope, and track as well as any man in 3 counties, and she had a particular talent for healing, having learned from an old Pawnee woman who lived near their property. When Brianna finally found Lucas, he was barely conscious, lying in the shade of his horse, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his lips cracked and bleeding. She dismounted quickly, her practiced eye taking in the situation in seconds. The wound, the fever, the dehydration. She had seen men die from less. His horse nickered softly at her approach, and she spoke quietly to calm the animal before kneeling beside the man. Lucas's eyes fluttered open, and even through the haze of fever, he registered the most striking face he had ever seen. The woman had dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid, sun-bronzed skin dusted with freckles, and eyes the color of a summer storm. She was checking his pulse, her fingers cool against his burning skin. "Can you hear me?" Her voice was steady, calm, the kind of voice that inspired confidence. "My name is Brianna. You have got a bad infection, and I need to treat it. Can you tell me your name?" "Lucas," he managed to rasp out, his throat dry as sand. "Lucas Morgan." "Well, Lucas Morgan, you are in a bad way, but I have handled worse. I am going to get some water in you first, then we need to deal with that wound. Do not try to move." She worked with efficient precision, first getting him to drink small sips of water from her canteen, then carefully cutting away his shirt to expose the angry red wound on his side. The flesh around it was hot to the touch, swollen and weeping. Brianna had brought her saddlebags, always prepared for emergencies on the range, and she pulled out clean cloth, a bottle of whiskey, and several packets of dried herbs. "This is going to hurt," she warned him, and Lucas tried to nod, but even that small movement sent waves of pain and nausea through him. When she poured the whiskey over the wound to clean it, he gritted his teeth so hard he thought they might crack, a strangled sound escaping his throat despite his best efforts. Brianna worked quickly, cleaning the wound thoroughly before packing it with a poultice made from yarrow and golden seal that the Pawnee woman had taught her to prepare. "The fever is the real problem now," she said, more to herself than to him. "We are too far from anywhere to move you safely, and moving you might make the infection spread faster. I am going to set up camp here and stay with you until the fever breaks." Lucas tried to protest, tried to tell her she should not waste her time on a stranger, that she should go back to wherever she came from. But the words would not come. The fever pulled him under again, and he drifted in and out of consciousness as Brianna efficiently set up a proper camp. She rigged a sunshade using blankets and rope staked to the ground, creating a sheltered area large enough for both of them. She unsaddled both horses and hobbled them where they could graze, then built a small fire and set water to boil. The first night was the worst. Lucas thrashed and mumbled in his delirium, sometimes crying out, sometimes speaking to people who were not there. Brianna stayed beside him, keeping him as cool as possible with wet cloths, forcing water and willow bark tea down his throat whenever he was conscious enough to swallow. She changed the poultice on his wound twice, pleased to see that it already looked slightly less angry, the herbs drawing out some of the infection. As dawn broke over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Lucas finally fell into a deeper, more restful sleep. Brianna allowed herself a few hours of rest then, though she kept one hand on her rifle. They were alone and vulnerable out here, and while she had seen no signs of other riders, she knew better than to be careless. When Lucas woke again, it was mid-morning, and the sun was already beating down with relentless intensity. His head felt clearer, though his body ached all over, and his throat was still painfully dry. Brianna was sitting nearby, mending a tear in his shirt, with neat practice stitches. She looked up when she heard him stir. "Welcome back," she said, a slight smile touching her lips. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a stampede," Lucas croaked. "How long?" "I found you yesterday around noon. You have been in and out since then, mostly out. The fever is still high, but I think we are winning. The wound looks better." Lucas tried to sit up, but Brianna was beside him in an instant, pressing him back down with surprising strength. "Stay put. You are not going anywhere for at least a few more days. You lost a lot of blood, and your body needs time to fight off the infection." "You should not be out here alone with me," Lucas said, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the situation. "People will talk." Brianna laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "People already talk about me, Lucas Morgan. I am 22 and unmarried, and I spend more time with horses and cattle than I do at church socials. Besides, I would rather have people gossip than have a man's death on my conscience because I worried about propriety. Now drink this." She held a cup of bitter-smelling tea to his lips, and Lucas drank obediently, grimacing at the taste. "What is in that?" "Better you do not know. Just trust that it will help bring down the fever and fight the infection. The Pawnee have been using these remedies for centuries, long before white doctors showed up with their leeches and mercury." Over the next 2 days, Lucas drifted in and out of feverish sleep, but the periods of clarity grew longer. Brianna stayed with him constantly, tending his wound, forcing fluids and food into him, keeping him cool during the blazing days, and warm during the surprisingly cold nights. During his waking moments, they talked, small conversations at first, but gradually growing deeper. Lucas learned that Brianna was the middle child, with an older brother named William, who was married and running his own spread near Omaha, and a younger brother, Thomas, who was 19 and still working their father's ranch. Their father, Robert Fletcher, was one of the early settlers in the area, having claimed his land back in 1854 when Iowa was still a frontier state. He had built up a successful cattle operation through hard work and fair dealing, and he had taught his children to value both. "William never understood why Papa taught me everything he taught the boys," Brianna told Lucas one evening, as the sun set in a spectacular display of orange and purple. She was changing his bandage, and he was finally able to sit up for the procedure without getting dizzy. "He thought I should learn to cook and sew and catch a husband. But Papa said that out here, everyone needs to be able to do everything. You never know when knowledge might save your life or someone else's." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Lucas said, watching her work. Her hands were gentle but confident, and he found himself noticing details about her he had been too fevered to see before. The way the setting sun caught golden highlights in her hair. The small scar on her chin that she must have gotten as a child. The way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled. "He is. He has always treated me like I had a brain worth using, which is more than most men do. Thomas is better about it. He and I have always been close. William came around eventually, especially after I helped birth a breech calf that would have died otherwise. Saved him a lot of money, that did." Lucas smiled at that. "I am starting to think I am very lucky you were the one who found me." Brianna met his eyes, and something passed between them, a spark of connection that made her heart skip unexpectedly. She looked away quickly, focusing on tying off the clean bandage. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Lucas said quietly. "Not everyone, and not everyone would have stayed." That night, Lucas's fever finally broke. He woke drenched in sweat, shivering despite the warm night air. Brianna heard him stirring and was immediately there, checking his forehead with the back of her hand. "The fever broke," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank God. Here, we need to get you out of these wet clothes and into something dry, or you will catch a chill." She helped him change into a spare shirt, keeping her eyes politely averted, though the lamplight still showed her the extent of his injuries. Besides the gunshot wound, he had bruises and scrapes all over, evidence of how hard he had ridden before the fever took him down. When he was settled again, wrapped in a dry blanket, she sat back on her heels. "You are going to live, Lucas Morgan. Thanks to you." He looked at her seriously. "I mean that. I would be dead right now if you had not found me. Well, I am glad I was out riding where I had no business being then. Papa is probably worried sick, but he knows I can take care of myself. I will need to get back soon, though, now that you are on the mend." The thought of her leaving sent an unexpected pang through Lucas's chest. Over the past days, even through the fog of fever, he had become accustomed to her presence, her voice, her calm competence. The idea of waking up and not seeing her there felt wrong somehow. "How far is your ranch?" he asked. "About 15 miles south. We are actually still on Fletcher land right now, just barely. This is the northern edge of our property, where it borders the open range." "And where are we in relation to Council Bluffs?" "About 20 miles northwest." "Why were you so far out?" Lucas explained about his work for the cattle company, checking fence lines and looking for strays. He had been doing seasonal work for them, saving money to buy his own land someday. The run-in with rustlers had been unexpected. They had been cutting wire and running off cattle, and when Lucas confronted them, they had not wanted to leave a witness. He had gotten off one shot before taking a bullet himself, and his horse had carried him away at a gallop. The rustlers had not pursued, probably figuring he would die from the wound anyway. "You were lucky," Brianna said grimly. "That bullet could have hit something vital. As it is, it went clean through without hitting bone or major blood vessels. You just needed someone to keep the wound clean and fight off the infection." "You make it sound simple. I have seen men die from wounds like this." "So have I. But you are young and strong, and you got treatment before it was too late. Another day or two, though, and it would have been a different story." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Crickets singing, the soft movement of the horses, the distant call of a coyote. The stars overhead were brilliant, undimmed by any town lights, a vast canopy of silver against black. "Tell me about yourself," Brianna said eventually. "Where are you from?" Lucas hesitated, then decided there was no point in holding back. This woman had saved his life, after all. "I am from Missouri originally. My parents had a small farm near Independence. They both died of smallpox when I was 16. I have been on my own since then, working various jobs, moving west. No other family to speak of." "I am sorry," Brianna said softly. "That must have been hard." "It was a long time ago. I got used to being alone. Probably better that way. No one to worry about, no one to let down." "That sounds lonely." Lucas glanced at her, surprised by her directness. "I suppose it is sometimes, but it is also simpler. I do not have to answer to anyone or explain myself. I can move on whenever I want." "And is that what you want? To always be moving on?" The question hung in the air between them. Lucas realized he did not have a good answer. A week ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. But now, looking at Brianna in the lamplight, something had shifted inside him. "I used to think so," he said finally. "Now I am not so sure." The next morning, Lucas was well enough to stand, though he was shaky and weak. Brianna insisted he eat a proper breakfast, which she prepared over the fire, with supplies from her saddlebags. Beans and bacon and hardtack softened in the bacon grease, not fancy but filling and nourishing. Lucas ate ravenously, surprised by his own hunger. "That is a good sign." Brianna said, watching him. Your body is starting to heal, but you are not ready to ride yet. Another day or two of rest at minimum. I have already taken too much of your time, Lucas protested. You need to get back to your family. I will be fine now. Brianna gave him a look that clearly said she thought he was an idiot. Lucas Morgan, if you try to ride in your condition, you will fall off your horse within a mile and undo all my hard work. I did not spend 3 days keeping you alive just to watch you kill yourself through stubbornness. You will rest today, and tomorrow we will see how you are doing. Lucas wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He was weak as a newborn calf, and just standing had made him lightheaded. Yes, madam, he said meekly, and was rewarded with one of her rare full smiles. They spent the day in quiet companionship. Brianna checked his wound several times and was pleased with how it was healing. The swelling had gone down significantly, and the angry redness was fading. She made him drink more of her bitter tea and eat again at midday, then insisted he rest in the shade while she tended to the horses and kept watch. As Lucas dozed, he found his thoughts returning again and again to Brianna. She was unlike any woman he had ever met. She was capable and confident without being harsh, strong without losing her femininity. She moved with an easy grace, completely comfortable in the wilderness. And there was something about her direct gaze, the way she looked at him like she could see right through any pretense, that both unnerved and attracted him. When he woke in the late afternoon, he found her sitting nearby, working on something with her hands. As he watched, he realized she was braiding leather strips into a new rein for one of the bridles. You are awake? She said, glancing up. How do you feel? Better. Stronger. It was true. The sleep had helped, and the persistent ache in his side had dulled to something more manageable. Good. We might be able to head back tomorrow then. I would like to get you to our ranch where you can recover properly. Papa will not mind. We have a spare room, and our cook makes much better food than what I can manage over a campfire. The idea of meeting her family made Lucas nervous in a way that facing down rustlers never had. I do not want to impose. You will not be. Besides, you saved the company's cattle when you confronted those rustlers, even if you got shot for your trouble. The least they can do is let you recover properly before you go back to work. Papa has connections with the big outfits. He can make sure you get credit for what you did. I was not looking for credit. I was just doing my job. Which is exactly the kind of answer my father respects. You will get along fine. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Brianna asked him about his plans for the future. Lucas found himself telling her about his dream of owning his own land someday, building something lasting instead of just drifting from job to job. I have been saving my wages, he explained. Every season I work, I put away as much as I can. In another year or two, I might have enough for a down payment on a small spread. Nothing fancy, but enough to run a few head of cattle, maybe breed horses. That is a good dream, Brianna said. Land is everything out here. Once you own your own piece of ground, no one can take it from you. Well, as long as you can pay the taxes and defend it. What about you? Lucas asked. What are your dreams? Brianna was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I want what every woman wants, I suppose. A home, a family. But I also want freedom. I do not want to be trapped in a house only cooking and cleaning while life passes me by outside. I want a partner, not a master. Someone who sees me as an equal. That does not seem like too much to ask, she laughed, but there was a bitter edge to it. You would be surprised. Most men around here want a wife who will obey and not ask questions. They want someone to warm their bed and raise their children and not have opinions. The few who have courted me could not handle that I can ride and shoot better than them. It threatens them somehow. Then they are fools, Lucas said quietly. What you have, the skills and knowledge and confidence, that is not a threat. That is a gift. Any man worth his salt would see that. Brianna looked at him, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression. You really mean that? I do. You saved my life, Brianna. I am not likely to forget what you are capable of. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Then Brianna broke eye contact, looking back at the fire, but Lucas saw the faint blush on her cheeks and felt his own heart beating faster. The next morning, they broke camp early. Lucas was still weak, but much improved, and he insisted he was well enough to ride. Brianna made him prove it by walking around the camp several times without getting dizzy, then grudgingly admitted he might manage the ride to the Fletcher ranch if they took it slow. They rode side by side across the prairie, the morning sun warm on their faces. Lucas sat his horse carefully, trying not to jar his injured side, but the pain was manageable. Brianna kept a close eye on him, ready to catch him if he started to sway, but he stayed upright and steady. As they rode, she pointed out landmarks and told him about the area. That low rise to the east was where her brother Thomas liked to practice his roping skills. That creek bed, dry now in late summer, ran bank full in spring and had good fishing. That stand of cottonwoods marked the spot where her father had proposed to her mother, back before Iowa was even a state. This land has a lot of history, Lucas observed. Every piece of land does if you know how to read it. The Pawnee and Odo tribes lived here long before we did. You can still find arrowheads and pottery shards if you know where to look. They had trails and camps, whole civilizations, before settlers came and pushed them out. That does not bother you? Brianna sighed. Of course it bothers me. But what can I do about it? I was born into this world, same as everyone else. I try to treat people fairly, learn from those who are willing to teach me, and honor the land. That is all anyone can do. It was a more thoughtful answer than Lucas had expected, and it gave him yet another reason to admire her. She did not shy away from hard truths or pretend the world was simpler than it was. The Fletcher Ranch came into view around mid-morning, a cluster of buildings nestled in a shallow valley with a creek running through it. The main house was a solid two-story structure built of wood and stone, clearly added onto over the years as the family grew and prospered. There were several outbuildings, a large barn, corrals, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. As they approached, a young man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes to see who was coming. When he recognized Brianna, his face broke into a grin, and he called back into the barn before jogging out to meet them. Bree, Pa was about ready to send out a search party. Where have you been? Saving this man's life, Brianna said matter-of-factly, dismounting. Thomas, this is Lucas Morgan. Lucas, my brother Thomas. Thomas Fletcher was tall and rangy, with the same sun-browned skin and storm-colored eyes as his sister. He was younger, probably 19 or so, with an open, friendly face. He approached Lucas's horse and offered a hand to help him dismount. Saving his life? What happened? Lucas swung down carefully, accepting Thomas's steadying hand when his knees threatened to buckle. Ran into some rustlers out on the range. They objected to me interrupting their work. Gunshot wound, Brianna added, taking Lucas's other arm. I found him fevered and half dead about 3 days ago. We have been camped out on the north section while I treated him. Thomas's eyes widened. And you did not think to send word? With what? A telegraph wire I carry in my saddlebag. Lucas could not be moved safely, and I was not about to leave him. Now help me get him inside before he falls over. He is weaker than he is letting on. Together they got Lucas into the house just as an older man came striding from the barn, followed by 2 ranch hands. Robert Fletcher was in his 50s, broad-shouldered and weather-beaten, with gray-streaked brown hair and the same direct gaze as his daughter. Brianna Louise Fletcher, you have some explaining to do, he called out, but his tone was more relieved than angry. Then he saw Lucas being supported by his children, and his expression shifted to concern. What happened? By the time they had Lucas settled in the spare bedroom and Brianna had filled her father in on the whole story, it was nearly noon. Robert Fletcher listened without interrupting, his face grave, then nodded slowly. You did right, Bree. A man's life is worth more than convention or worry. But next time, if there is any way to send word, please do. I know you can take care of yourself, but I am still your father. I worry. I know, Pa. I am sorry. Robert turned his attention to Lucas, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying not to show how exhausted the short journey had left him. Lucas Morgan, is it? Brianna says you were working for the Continental Cattle Company, protecting their herds from rustlers. Yes, sir. I have been riding fence for them for the past 2 months. And you got shot for your trouble. Well, you are welcome to stay here while you recover. We have room, and it is the least we can do after you tried to protect property that could just as easily have been ours. Those rustlers do not discriminate. Thank you, sir. I will work to pay for my keep once I am on my feet again. Robert waved that away. Let us worry about that when you are healed. For now, rest and get your strength back. Emma, our cook, will bring you some food. You look like you could use about 10 good meals. Over the following days, Lucas did exactly that. Rested, ate, and slowly regained his strength. The Fletcher household was warm and welcoming, so different from the solitary life he had been living. Emma, the cook, was a plump, grandmotherly woman who seemed to take personal offense at how thin Lucas was, and made it her mission to fatten him up. Thomas was friendly and open, treating Lucas like an old friend rather than a stranger. And Robert was gruff but fair, checking on Lucas every day and discussing everything from cattle prices to weather patterns to politics. But it was Brianna who Lucas found himself watching for, listening for. She came by several times a day to check his wound and change his bandages, and those moments became the highlights of his day. They would talk while she worked, conversations ranging from the trivial to the profound. She told him about growing up on the ranch, about the challenges of frontier life, about her frustrations with the limited options available to women. He told her about his travels, the places he had seen, the dreams he still held for the future. Sometimes their hands would brush accidentally, and the contact sent a jolt through Lucas that had nothing to do with his injury. He found himself noticing everything about her, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the soft sound of her laugh, the competent grace of her movements. He was falling for her, he realized, and falling hard, but he had nothing to offer her. He was a drifter with no land, no real prospects, just some savings and a dream. She deserved better than that. She deserved someone established, someone who could give her the life and freedom she wanted. He was so lost in these thoughts one afternoon, about a week into his stay at the ranch, that he did not notice Brianna had finished changing his bandage and was watching him with an amused expression. "Where did you go just then?" she asked. Lucas blinked, coming back to the present. "Sorry, just thinking." "About what?" He could not tell her the truth, so he said, "About how much I owe you and your family. You have all been so kind to me." "We are not keeping score, Lucas. This is what people do out here. We help each other. If we did not, none of us would survive. Still, I need to start pulling my weight. I am feeling much better. Maybe I could help around the ranch, at least with light work." Brianna considered this. "I will talk to Pa, but I think that could be arranged. You should not be doing anything too strenuous yet, but there is always work to be done that does not require heavy lifting." The next day, Lucas started helping around the ranch. At first, it was simple tasks: mending tack, sorting supplies, helping Emma in the kitchen garden. But as his strength returned, he took on more responsibilities. Thomas taught him the specific way the Fletchers like things done, and Lucas proved to be a quick study. He had a natural way with horses, and soon he was helping break the green stock that Robert had bought to train and resell. The work felt good, purposeful in a way his drifting never had. And being part of the Fletcher household, even temporarily, filled a void Lucas had not realized was there. He started to understand what he had been missing all these years, moving from place to place with no real connections. One evening in early September, about 3 weeks after Brianna had found him on the range, Lucas was sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The air had begun to cool with the approach of autumn, and there was a crispness to it that felt fresh and invigorating. Brianna came out and sat beside him, handing him a cup of coffee. "Thank you," he said, accepting it gratefully, "for the coffee and for everything else." "You have thanked me at least 100 times, Lucas. You can stop now." "I do not think I can." "You changed my life, Brianna. You could have ridden past, could have decided I was not worth the trouble, but you stayed." She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkening prairie. "I stayed because I could not do otherwise. It would not have been right to leave you there. Maybe, but I think it was more than that. I think you stayed because of who you are. You are the kind of person who does what needs to be done, even when it is hard, even when it is inconvenient. That is rare." Brianna turned to look at him, and in the fading light, her eyes were very blue. "What are you trying to say, Lucas?" He took a breath, knowing he was about to cross a line but unable to stop himself. "I am saying that these past weeks here have been the happiest I have had in years. I am saying that I wake up every morning looking forward to the day because I know I will see you. I am saying that I am falling in love with you, Brianna Fletcher, and I do not know what to do about it." The words hung in the air between them. Brianna's expression was unreadable, and Lucas felt his heart sinking. He had overstepped, presumed too much, ruined everything. Then she smiled, a slow, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. "You could start by kissing me," she said softly. Lucas did not need to be told twice. He set down his coffee cup and cupped her face in his hands, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened as weeks of unspoken longing poured into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I have nothing to offer you," he whispered. "No land, no house, just some savings and a lot of dreams." "I do not need things, Lucas. I need you. I need someone who sees me as I am and loves me anyway. Someone who does not want to change me or tame me. Do you think you could be that person?" "I know I could. I would spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "Then that is enough. We will figure out the rest together." They sat together on the porch until the stars came out, talking about the future, making plans. Lucas told her about his savings, how much he had, and what it might buy. Brianna told him about a piece of land that bordered the Fletcher ranch, good grazing with water access, that had recently come up for sale. Maybe, if they pooled their resources and Lucas continued to work, they could afford it. "You would do that?" Lucas asked, amazed. "Invest in land with me? I would do more than that. I would marry you if you are asking." Lucas stared at her, then laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I'm asking. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But I have never been more sure of anything. Brianna Fletcher, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will." They told her father the next day. Robert Fletcher listened to their announcement with a carefully neutral expression, then asked to speak with Lucas alone. Brianna gave Lucas an encouraging squeeze on the arm before leaving them in her father's study. Robert poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Lucas before settling into his chair with a sigh. "So you want to marry my daughter?" "Yes, sir. I know I do not have much to recommend me right now, but I am a hard worker and I love her. I will spend my life making sure she is happy and has everything she needs." "Everything she needs," Robert repeated thoughtfully. "What do you think she needs, Lucas?" The question caught Lucas off guard. "I suppose every woman needs security, a home, a husband who can provide. Maybe some women, but not Brianna. Oh, she needs those things too, but that is not what she needs most. What she needs is freedom. She needs to be able to ride and work and make her own choices. She needs a partner who respects her mind as much as her heart. She needs someone who will not try to cage her just because society says that is what a husband should do. Can you give her that? Lucas met Robert's eyes steadily. I can, sir. I have seen what Brianna is capable of. She saved my life with her knowledge and skill. Why would I want to diminish that? I want to build a life with her, not rule over her. Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good answer. You know, when my wife was alive, we were partners in every sense of the word. She worked beside me to build this ranch, and I valued her opinion on everything. When she died, I made sure to teach our children, all of them, including Brianna, everything they would need to survive and thrive. William never understood that, but Thomas and Brianna did. I have been waiting for a man to come along who would appreciate what I helped Brianna become, rather than resent it. I think you might be that man. I will do my best to be worthy of her, sir. See that you do. Now about this land you want to buy. The Morrison place, correct? Yes, sir. Brianna mentioned it was for sale. It is. About 300 acres. Good grass. Creek access. Needs some work on the buildings, but solid bones. I happen to know the owner is motivated to sell. With your savings and what Brianna has put away over the years, from selling horses she has trained, you might be close to what he is asking, and I might be willing to loan you the difference, to be paid back without interest over time. Lucas felt hope surge in his chest. Sir, that is incredibly generous. It is practical. That land borders mine. I would rather have family as neighbors than strangers, and this way Brianna stays close, which makes me happy. You will still have to work hard to make the place profitable, but you will have a start. What do you say? I say thank you, sir. You will not regret this. I had better not. Now let us go tell Brianna and Thomas the good news before they wear a hole in the floor from pacing. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, in early October, when the leaves were turning gold and red and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. It was a small affair, held at the ranch with just family and close friends. Brianna wore a simple but beautiful dress in cream-colored silk that Emma had helped her sew, and Lucas wore his best suit, newly purchased for the occasion. Thomas stood up with Lucas, and one of Brianna's childhood friends, Sarah Miller, stood with Brianna. The ceremony was performed by the circuit preacher who came through once a month, and Robert gave his daughter away with tears in his eyes. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Brianna with all the love and promise he felt, and the small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful, with good food, music from Thomas's fiddle, and dancing in the barn that had been cleared out for the occasion. As Lucas danced with his new wife, holding her close and swaying to the music, he thought about how different his life looked now compared to just 3 months ago. He had been alone, drifting, half dead from a gunshot wound and fever. Now he had a wife, a family, a piece of land to call his own, and a future full of possibility. What are you thinking about? Brianna asked, looking up at him with those storm-blue eyes. About how lucky I am, about how I was dying alone on the open range, and you rode out and stayed until the fever broke. You saved more than my life that day, Brianna. You saved me. She smiled and rested her head against his chest. We saved each other, Lucas. I was stuck, unsure of how to have the life I wanted. You showed me it was possible. We are a team now. Partners. Partners, Lucas agreed, kissing the top of her head. I like the sound of that. They moved into the Morrison place the week after the wedding. It was rough at first, the house needing significant repairs and the land requiring hard work to bring it up to the condition they wanted. But they tackled it together, working side by side from dawn to dusk. Lucas proved to be a skilled carpenter, and he rebuilt the sagging porch, fixed the leaking roof, and replaced the broken windows. Brianna used her knowledge of horses to start a breeding program, using mares from her father's stock and a quality stallion they purchased with their wedding gift money. Together they repaired fences, cleared brush, and slowly built up their small herd of cattle. It was not easy. There were days when Lucas's old wound ached, when the work seemed overwhelming, when they fell into bed exhausted and wondered if they had bitten off more than they could chew. But there were also days of triumph, of progress, of sitting on their porch in the evening and looking at what they had built together with pride. Winter came hard that year, with heavy snows and bitter cold, but the house was tight and warm, and they had laid in plenty of supplies. On the longest, coldest nights, they sat by the fire and made plans for spring, for the foals that would be born, for the calves they hoped to raise, for the life they were building. One night in late January, as snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth, Brianna told Lucas she was pregnant. He stared at her for a moment, stunned, then let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "A child." "We are," Brianna confirmed, her eyes shining with happiness and a little fear. "Are you ready to be a father?" "I do not know, but I am ready to try, and I know you will be an amazing mother. We will figure it out together, just like everything else." The baby, a boy they named Matthew, was born in late summer of the following year. Lucas had been terrified during the birth, pacing outside while Emma and the midwife attended to Brianna, but when he finally heard his son's first cry and was allowed inside to meet him, all the fear melted away into pure wonder. Brianna looked exhausted but radiant, holding their tiny son with a mixture of fierce protectiveness and tender love. When she placed Matthew in Lucas's arms for the first time, he felt something shift inside him, a new understanding of what it meant to be responsible for another life. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered, staring down at the tiny face, the impossibly small fingers that wrapped around his thumb. "He is ours," Brianna said softly. "Our son. The first of many, I hope." Over the next few years, their family grew. A daughter, Caroline, arrived 2 years after Matthew, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's brown eyes. Then another son, James, 2 years after that, with a smile that could melt hearts and a stubborn streak a mile wide. The ranch grew too. Lucas and Brianna built a reputation for quality horses, and buyers came from as far as Omaha and Kansas City to purchase their stock. The cattle herd expanded steadily, and they added more land, buying adjacent parcels as they became available. They hired ranch hands to help with the work, and Brianna's brother Thomas eventually came to work with them after their father retired and sold the original Fletcher ranch to William. Lucas never forgot where he had come from, the lonely drifter with no connections and no real future. He made sure to treat his ranch hands fairly, paying them well and giving them time off when they needed it. He and Brianna became known throughout the region as good people to work for, and they never had trouble finding reliable help. One day in late spring, when Matthew was 7, Caroline was 5, and James was 3, the whole family rode out to the spot where Brianna had found Lucas all those years ago. It was something they did once a year, a sort of pilgrimage to remember where their story had started. "This is where Mama found Papa," Brianna told the children as they sat on a blanket in the grass, eating the lunch Emma had packed for them. "He was very sick, and I had to take care of him until he got better." "And then you got married?" Caroline asked, her blue eyes wide with interest. "Eventually, yes, after we got to know each other and fell in love." "Tell us the story again," Matthew begged. He had heard it dozens of times, but never seemed to tire of it. So Brianna and Lucas told the story together, taking turns with different parts. The fever, the fear, the long days, and nights of waiting for the fever to break. The conversations that turned into friendship, friendship that turned into love. The marriage, the ranch, the life they had built together. "What is the most important part?" James asked when they finished. Lucas looked at Brianna, and they shared a smile. "The most important part," Lucas said, "is that sometimes the worst moments in your life can lead to the best things. I thought I was dying alone, but instead, I found your mother. I found a family. I found a home. And I found a partner, Brianna added. Someone who sees me as an equal and loves me for who I am, not who he wants me to be. That is worth everything. The children seemed satisfied with this answer, and they ran off to explore and play, while Lucas and Brianna sat together on the blanket, watching them. Do you ever regret it? Lucas asked quietly. Giving up your freedom to marry me? To have children? Brianna looked at him, surprised. Lucas Morgan, I did not give up my freedom. I chose a different kind of freedom. I can still ride, still work with horses, still make decisions about our ranch. And I have you and our children, which makes everything better, not worse. Do you regret marrying me? Never. Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Brianna. Then stop asking foolish questions and kiss me. He did, and even after all these years, it still felt like magic. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and rose, they packed up their picnic and headed home. The ranch house rose in the distance, solid and welcoming, smoke curling from the chimney where Emma was preparing supper. The horses in the pasture nickered a greeting as they rode past, and the cattle grazed peacefully in the fading light. Lucas looked at it all, at the life he and Brianna had built together, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance that day on the open range, when a brave, capable woman had refused to ride past a dying stranger. She had stayed, nursed him through the fever, and in doing so had given him everything he had never dared to dream of. Years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. The ranch weathered droughts and harsh winters, good years and lean ones. Matthew grew into a strong, capable young man who shared his father's way with horses and his mother's steady temperament. Caroline turned out to have a gift for numbers and helped manage the ranch's finances with a skill that impressed even the bank managers in Council Bluffs. James inherited his mother's stubborn determination and his father's wanderlust, though he always came home in the end. When Matthew turned 18, he asked if he could bring a young woman to dinner to meet his parents. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was the daughter of a shopkeeper in Council Bluffs. She was sweet and sensible, with a quick wit and a kind heart, and Lucas and Brianna liked her immediately. When Matthew asked for their blessing to marry her, they gave it gladly. The wedding was held at the ranch, much like Lucas and Brianna's had been, and watching their oldest son exchange vows brought tears to both their eyes. It reminded them of their own beginning, of how young they had been, how uncertain of the future. But they had built something lasting, and now their son was starting his own journey. Matthew and Elizabeth built a small house on the northern section of the ranch, and Matthew took over more and more of the day-to-day operations as Lucas and Brianna began to slow down with age. It was a natural transition, and Lucas was grateful that his son wanted to continue what they had started. Caroline, to everyone's surprise, decided she wanted to study bookkeeping formally and took a position with a bank in Omaha. It was unconventional for a woman, but by the 1890s, attitudes were slowly starting to change. Brianna encouraged her daughter's ambitions, remembering her own struggles to be taken seriously. James eventually settled down as well, marrying a rancher's daughter from Nebraska and bringing her home to work the ranch alongside Matthew. The two brothers made a good team, and Lucas knew the ranch would be in capable hands when he and Brianna were gone. One evening in early autumn, much like the autumn when they had married, Lucas and Brianna sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with years of hard work and weather. But their hands still found each other automatically, fingers intertwining as they had done for decades. "Do you remember when you found me?" Lucas asked, a question that had become a ritual over the years. "I remember," Brianna said softly. "You were half dead from fever, too stubborn to admit how sick you were. And you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even through the haze of illness." Brianna laughed. "I was dusty and sunburned and probably did not smell very good after 2 days of riding. You were perfect. You are perfect. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night, the voices of their sons and daughters-in-law, the laughter of grandchildren playing in the barn, the soft lowing of cattle, the whinny of horses, all the sounds of a life fully lived, of a family thriving. I was thinking today, Brianna said eventually, about how different my life would have been if I had not ridden out that day, if I had stayed home like a proper lady was supposed to. Do you wish you had? No, never. Finding you, saving you, that was the best decision I ever made. Everything good in my life came from that choice. Everything good in my life came from you staying. I would have died out there if you had not found me. But more than that, I would have died without ever knowing what it meant to truly live. You taught me that, Brianna. You showed me what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself, to build something lasting, to love and be loved in return. Brianna squeezed his hand. We did it together. Everything we built as partners. And I would not have had it any other way. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their granddaughter Emma, named for the beloved cook who had passed away a few years earlier, came running up to the porch. Grandma, Grandpa, Mama says supper is ready. Are you coming? We are coming, sweetheart, Brianna said, rising from her chair with only a slight stiffness to betray her age. Lucas stood as well, offering his arm to his wife out of habit, and together they walked into the house, into the warmth and light and laughter of their family. The meal was chaotic and wonderful, with 3 generations gathered around the expanded dining table. Matthew and Elizabeth's 4 children, ranging from 12 to 3, kept things lively, as did James and his wife Sarah's 2 youngsters. Caroline had come home for a visit from Omaha and entertained everyone with stories of city life. After supper, Matthew asked his father to come look at a horse that had developed a limp, and they walked out to the barn together in the cool evening air. Pa, Matthew said as they examined the horse's leg, I wanted to ask you something. Elizabeth and I have been talking, and we think it is time to expand the breeding program. Add a few more quality mares, maybe diversify into draft horses, as well as saddle stock. What do you think? Lucas felt a surge of pride. His son was not just maintaining what had been built, he was looking to improve it, to grow it. I think that is a fine idea. Your mother would know better than me about the specifics, but the principle is sound. What does she say? She says to trust my judgment, but do my research first. Make sure there is a market before we invest. That is good advice. Your mother has always been the smart one in this family. Matthew grinned. I think you are both pretty smart, Pa. You built something good here, something lasting. I want to honor that and build on it for my own children. You already are, son. I am proud of the man you have become, of the work you are doing. This ranch will be in good hands when I am gone. Do not talk like that. You have plenty of years left. Maybe, but we all get old eventually. I just want you to know that I am proud of you. Matthew, of all my children, you have all exceeded anything I could have hoped for. Father and son stood together in the barn for a moment, not needing words, understanding passing between them. Then they finished examining the horse, decided it was a minor strain that would heal with rest, and walked back to the house. That night, as Lucas and Brianna lay in bed, the house quiet around them, Lucas thought about everything they had built together. A ranch, a family, a legacy that would continue after they were gone. It was more than he had ever dreamed possible that day when he lay fevered and dying on the open range. What are you thinking about? Brianna asked sleepily, her head on his shoulder. About us. About how lucky I am. We are both lucky. We found each other at exactly the right moment. You saved my life. And you gave me a reason to use everything my father taught me. You gave me a partnership, a family, a life better than I imagined. We saved each other, Lucas. We always have. Lucas kissed her forehead. breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. I love you, Brianna Morgan. I have loved you since the moment I opened my eyes and saw you there. An angel in the wilderness. I was never an angel, just a stubborn woman who could not leave a dying man to his fate. My stubborn woman, my partner, my love. Forever, Brianna murmured, already drifting off to sleep. Forever, Lucas agreed. The years continued their steady march forward. Lucas and Brianna grew older but remained active, still offering advice and wisdom to their children, but stepping back to let the younger generation run the ranch. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a growing family, with grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren filling the house with noise and laughter during holidays and gatherings. Lucas never forgot the lessons he had learned, both from his lonely early years and from his life with Brianna. He made sure to tell his children and grandchildren often that he loved them, that he was proud of them, that family was the most important thing in the world. He taught his grandsons to be gentle with women, to see them as equals, to value their minds and hearts. He taught his granddaughters that they could be anything they wanted to be, do anything they set their minds to, just as their grandmother had done. Brianna, for her part, remained a force to be reckoned with even in her later years. She still rode when the weather was good, still had opinions on every aspect of the ranch's operation, still commanded respect from everyone who knew her. She had become something of a legend in the region, the woman who had nursed a dying stranger back to health and built an empire with him. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family threw a huge celebration. People came from all over, former ranch hands and neighbors, business associates and friends. The party lasted all day, with food and music and dancing, stories and laughter and toasts to the happy couple. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Lucas and Brianna found themselves alone on the porch again, watching the last golden rays fade from the sky. 40 years, Lucas said wonderingly. How did it go so fast? I do not know, but I would not trade a single day of it. Not even the hard times, the drought of '83, that winter when we almost lost everything. Not even those. They made us stronger, proved we could weather anything together. Besides, the good times far outweighed the bad. Lucas pulled her close, and they stood together, two people who had become one through years of shared joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. If I could go back, Lucas said softly, and change anything about my life, I would not. Every choice I made, every hardship I endured, led me to you, to this life. I would do it all again exactly the same way. Even getting shot by rustlers, even that, because it put me on that range where you found me. It gave me a second chance at life, a chance to build something meaningful. I will be grateful for that until my last breath. Brianna turned in his arms to face him, her eyes still that same striking blue despite the years, shining with love. You know what I remember most about those days when I found you? It was not the fear that you might die, or the work of keeping you alive. It was the moment I realized I wanted you to live, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because I wanted to know you, to hear your story, to see where life might lead us. I fell in love with you while I was nursing you through that fever. Lucas Morgan, and I have never stopped. I fell in love with you the moment I opened my eyes and saw you there, my guardian angel, even if you refused to admit it. They kissed, the same sweet connection that had sustained them through 4 decades, then walked back into the house hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family, to celebrate the life they had built together. Lucas lived to be 78 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night with Brianna beside him. The whole family gathered for his funeral, 3 generations mourning a man who had been husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, a man who had built a legacy of love and hard work. Brianna stood at his graveside, holding the hands of her grandchildren, and spoke of the man she had loved for more than 50 years. She told the story one more time about finding him fevered and dying on the open range, about staying with him until the fever broke, about falling in love and building a life together. She spoke of his kindness, his strength, his unwavering devotion to his family. "He was a good man," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "The best man I ever knew. And I am grateful for every day we had together." After the funeral, as the family gathered back at the ranch, Matthew came to his mother with a question that had been weighing on him. "Ma, what will you do now? Will you stay at the ranch?" Brianna looked around at the house she and Lucas had built, at the land they had worked together, at the family they had created. "Of course I will stay. This is my home. Your father is buried here, in the family plot we chose together. I will tend his grave, spend time with my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and keep his memory alive. There is nowhere else I would rather be." Brianna lived another 5 years after Lucas passed, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She continued to offer advice on the ranch, to tell stories to the younger generations, to ride when she could, and walk the property when she could not ride. She visited Lucas's grave every day, talking to him, updating him on family news, telling him how much she missed him. When Brianna's time finally came, on a crisp autumn day that reminded everyone of the day she and Lucas had married, she slipped away peacefully surrounded by her children. Her last words were, "I am coming, Lucas, wait for me." They buried her beside her husband, and the whole region turned out to mourn the passing of a remarkable woman. The preacher spoke of her strength, her wisdom, her unwavering love for her family. Matthew and Carolyn and James all spoke, sharing memories and stories, painting a picture of a woman who had lived life on her own terms and built something lasting. The ranch continued to thrive, passing down through the generations, each adding their own contributions while honoring the foundation that Lucas and Brianna had laid. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder of how love can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, how kindness and courage can change lives. Years later, when Matthew's own grandchildren were grown and running the ranch, they erected a monument on the spot where Brianna had found Lucas all those years ago. It was a simple stone marker with an inscription that read, "Here in August 1873, Brianna Fletcher found Lucas Morgan fevered and dying. She stayed until the fever broke, and in doing so, changed both their lives forever." From that act of compassion grew a love story that spanned 5 decades and created a family that continues to this day. May we all have the courage to stop and help, to stay when others would leave, to love when love is hard. Every year, on the anniversary of that day, the family gathered at the monument for a picnic, keeping alive the tradition that Lucas and Brianna had started. They told the story to each new generation, making sure the children understood where they came from, what their great-great-grandparents had built, and the values of kindness, hard work, and love that had founded their family. The ranch itself became one of the most successful in Iowa, known for quality horses and cattle, for fair dealing, and for treating employees with respect. The Morgan name became synonymous with integrity in the region, a direct result of the example Lucas and Brianna had set and the values they had instilled in their children. And on quiet evenings, when the wind swept across the prairie and the sun set in shades of gold and crimson, if you listened carefully, some said you could still hear the echo of their love story carried on the breeze, the story of a man who had been dying alone and a woman who had refused to let him die, the story of how staying, of refusing to leave, had created something beautiful and lasting, the story of true partnership, true love, and a legacy that would endure for generations to come. Their love had started with a fever on the open range, and a woman brave enough to stay. It had grown into a marriage that weathered every storm, a family that spanned generations, and a ranch that stood as testament to what two people could build together when they refused to give up on each other. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard times and harder work, but most of all, it was a love story, pure and true and eternal. And so the legacy of Lucas Morgan and Brianna Fletcher lived on, in the land they had tended, in the children they had raised, in the love they had shared, and in the countless lives they had touched through their example of partnership, courage, and devotion. They had proven that love could bloom in the harshest conditions, that staying when others would leave could change everything, and that two people working together as equals could build something that would last long after they were gone. Their story became more than just family history. It became a reminder that the choices we make in crucial moments define us, that compassion and courage can change lives, and that true love, when nurtured and protected, can withstand anything. Lucas and Brianna had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and they had built a love story for the ages, one that continued to inspire long after they had gone.